Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Paycheck Protection Program Loan webinar. We're really excited today to go in depth on the Paycheck Protection Program and how every company in the state of Utah, including those, and particularly those in the multicultural community, have an opportunity, can get online, can register, and benefit from this program. We welcome everybody who are watching in live on YouTube, where we record this. And so all the different organizations that are helping to engage and support and be partners and work with the multicultural community will have an opportunity to share this out far and wide because this is such a significant program and opportunity for every small business here in the state of Utah. My name is Miles Hanson. I'm the president and CEO of World Trade Center Utah. We're an organization here in the state that in normal times is focused on helping Utah companies grow and expand internationally and attract investment here to the state. Also in the process, we're working to enhance Utah's global status to be known as a global destination of business, trade, and investment. Over the past few months, we've been serving as part of the Governor's Economic Response Task Force. On that task force, we were asked to organize a federal committee that was focused from the very beginning on maximizing the number of Utah companies that were able to benefit from federal programs and resources, particularly the Paycheck Protection Program. Let me hurry and explain briefly at this point. Hopefully everybody in the state has heard about the PPP loan program. This is an opportunity for Utah businesses to get a loan from a lender that's backed by the Small Business Administration, the federal agency, that will offset the costs and the losses that they've experienced from COVID by providing 2.5 times the amount of the average monthly payroll for a company last year. Companies that receive that amount of money can then use it over an extended period of time. It originally was 8 weeks, and now I believe it's 24 weeks to cover key costs associated with payroll, utilities, rent, and mortgage interest, with 60% of the loan amount being necessary to go towards payroll. As long as companies use the loan for what it was designed to be used for, that funding, that loan, that amount that they use it for those areas can then be forgiven, which then makes it like a grant. And so what this means for companies is companies that have been facing, historic economic hardship and challenges over the past few months will be able to apply for, receive this funding to help bridge the gap until we're able to get the economy fully reactivated, increase demand, and move forward in a productive way. And so I'm joined today with three really phenomenal leaders here in the state of Utah, Byron Russell, Giles Witherspoon-Boyd, and Dean Hirabayashi. Thank you to all three of you for being with us today. Before we turn over, we hear from the others. Here in the state of Utah, we've put a lot of focus on helping companies apply for and receive PPP loans. We did a couple things early on. One, we set up a system to distill the key bits of information on the program and push that out as far and wide as we could across the state. We also recognized that companies would have a very hard time navigating this program, and there have been a lot of changes in the program over the past few months. And a lot of companies aren't used to applying and dealing with these types of government programs. And so we set up what we called a rapid response team to be able to provide one-on-one assistance to Utah companies. It was a really, really incredible story. Early on in early April, when we all were in crisis phase, we put out a call for volunteers. Within a couple of days, we had more than 75 people here in the state of Utah raise their hand, and they were willing to, in addition to doing their regular jobs, without any pay or compensation, they volunteered to be members of this rapid response team. They quickly became experts in this program, and we set up a process where any company in the state could go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business. In the federal section of that page, there's a big link where people could request assistance from the rapid response team. A company could click that. They put in a little bit of detailed information about the business. They ask their question. And then on the back end, we had all these volunteers trained up so they could quickly and efficiently provide support to the companies. The team was charged with not just providing information, but for providing solutions and solving problems. And so each member of the team would engage with the company. They would do phone calls, text messages, emails, do whatever they had to do to help the company get the assistance that they needed so they could benefit from these programs. Through this effort and many people across the state, Utah ended up being the #1 state in the country for utilizing the PPP loan program. I think 97.5% of eligible payroll was covered by the program, which means that a vast majority of small businesses here in the state applied for and received the program. What the focus has been on over the past 2 or 3 weeks is getting those companies that have not yet applied. And the majority of those companies are independent contractors that don't realize that they are eligible, sole proprietorships that also just aren't aware of it, they don't realize that they can apply for it as well. And then also in our multicultural communities, oftentimes there are language barriers which make it more difficult for them to realize that these resources exist to help them through the process. And that's why we're so grateful for our partners for pulling this webinar together and to help get the word out to our multicultural community so they have an opportunity to learn about the program, because there still is funding available, but the deadline is June 30th. And so time is of the essence to get as many companies to apply as possible. And so the call to action for me would be for any company out there or any independent contractor. This includes Uber drivers, people that, working in hair salons or spas, my real estate agents, they all can apply for the program. So if you've done it, go out and talk to people you're working with, people who cut your hair, who maybe mow your lawn, who friends and neighbors, and make sure they're aware of it. I think of a very good friend of mine just a few weeks ago. He's a real estate agent who runs his own brokerage, works for himself, and we were having a casual conversation one evening, and I brought up what I was doing at work and the PPP program, and he was shocked. He said, I had no idea I could apply. And the way it works for him, because he doesn't have employees, he doesn't have payroll, all he has to do is he averages out his average net income over the past year, and he then is eligible to apply to and receive 2.5 times that. And then as long as he uses that to pay himself and pay his rent, then that can be forgiven. And so he went ahead, he applied, received the funding, and that's been a big boost to him. I was in getting my hair cut a couple weeks ago and had a conversation with the woman that was cutting my hair. She also was hit so hard with COVID, one of the hardest hit aspects of our economy. She knew the program but didn't know that she was eligible. And so I made sure as I talked there in the barber shop, there were 7 or 8 people cutting hair, and I guess I was spreading the good word about the PPP program. And all those people there, they're all independent contractors. They had no idea they could apply. And that's why it's so important that we get the word out. And so again, thank you for all of our panelists for joining us today, and thank you to all of our partners who are working hard to get the word out far and wide about this program. Let me go ahead and pass the baton to Byron Russell. Byron Russell is a very important leader here in the state of Utah, working in the civics and arts and culture and business, helping businesses grow and expand. He also is a co-chair of the state's multicultural committee or commission, and in that capacity also helping to lead the multicultural subcommittee of the governor's economic task force. So Byron, I'll hand it over to you to share your perspective, and then we'll go ahead and talk to our business owner and our lender to get their perspective on this program.
Well, Miles, thank you, and thank you for this forum. And I'm glad this is recorded because I feel that it will be a resource that people will want to watch. And I really appreciate the fact that I think we have this wonderful relationship that you are bringing to our communities, a resource, and we hopefully are bringing to you the same. I think it said that the crisis is the mother of all inventions. And I think crisis is also the mother of all relationships. And in that relationship, we really appreciate you and the World Trade Center for what you're doing, but also before the world turned a little sort of uniquely in a different twist, it was great to meet with you and talk to you about finding ways to bring and invite more multicultural communities into the business landscape of the World Trade Center. And finding those methods through the Multicultural Commission and other organizations like that, it was something that we were exploring. And then maybe a week later, we found reason to explore. And so I'm just thrilled that I'm able to share as if I'm offering these incredible talented people. They are in themselves really amazing, but Dean and Giles are phenomenal people to have on your panel to give a different perspective. And I just think that it's really important that you've allowed us this opportunity to go beyond this idea that there's this huge, big package of PPP. And I think that one thing that really did sort of make us realize that we need to partner a little better was that when the PPP came out and we were told that it's first come, first serve, do your best to get some, it was really something that we thought this kind of forum could help take people through. Number one, as you mentioned, be aware that it still exists. Number two, be aware that you don't have to be a big shot, huge multinational company to participate. And that three, that our voices and our parts that we contribute to this community holistically in the state of Utah is essential for our recovery. And so with that, I'll let you introduce our speakers because you do that so well. And I think that you will be so impressed with what they will have to offer. So thank you, Miles.
Great. Thank you, Byron, for that introduction. Okay, so we've got two great business leaders here in the state with us today. First off, I'll introduce Giles Witherspoon-Boyd, who is the CEO and co-founder of Protocol PCI. We also, I'll introduce you, Dean, here in a second. So Giles, you are a small business owner. You have applied for the PPP loan. Can you walk through what the process was at the beginning and what you experienced, and then contrast that with what people could expect to experience as a small business owner if they go ahead and apply right now?
Thank you for this opportunity. And first, I do want to say thank you to all of us and all the groups that invited us out here today, especially Miles. We inadvertently worked together in April when I applied. I contacted the coronavirus line and asked about questions while we were filling out the PPP loan application. The very first day it opened, it was a regular form, and it was a bear. My co-founder has a master's in accounting, and we were having a hard time getting through it. It actually took us a couple days, even though we were an organized business, to get all of the documentation that was actually being required at that time together. And the day we did, the SBA site crashed. So then we went through I think 3 different lenders at the time. It was pretty chaotic. And what we learned in that was it would have been better to work with someone we already had a relationship with, but that wasn't possible because we were switching banking relationships at that time. So it was bad timing on our part. However, the documentation that was needed was pretty daunting. It was not something that you would maybe have on hand just because in the beginning. By the time we finished filling it out, which we started the first day, we finished it 2 days before they closed the first little section, before Congress had to refund it. They changed the application 5 times, and it became easier each time. So one of the things that was a big hang-up is if you did not speak English. In the very beginning, it was in 1 language. By the time we finished, I think it was in 10, and I believe now it's in 12. So these are the challenges that we faced as small business owners, besides the other uncertainty going on. Most small business owners like me became a principal and a school teacher, as well as trying to handle what was going on with our companies and managing this new process that came along. And don't get me wrong, the program was great. It was very, very difficult in the beginning to find lenders who had their applications up, and then for those to stay open. And then there were other, they weren't expecting the amount of people to connect and want to use the program that did reach out. So that did cause issues. But I will say, well, that's where we were then. And we'll talk about where we are now a little bit later.
That's great. Thank you very much, Giles, for that perspective. I appreciate it. Now let's hear from you. So that's the small business perspective. Dean, like I mentioned, runs a credit union, and one of the lenders here in the state that works so hard. My guess is, Dean, you and your team were working around the clock early on because there were so many people out there applying, and there was this mad rush to get applications in because the funding people knew would run out in that first round, and we're very, very grateful that Congress appropriated more money. That funding has been sufficient, so it hasn't run out yet. Dean, it'd be fascinating to get your perspective on what it was like towards the beginning when this was in the news and a lot of people applied, but a lot of people may have discounted the program because of what was in the news. And then what are you experiencing at this point? And then also a third thing for you, Dean, I think would be really helpful is what advice would you give to those smallest business owners, those independent contractors, my real estate buddy or the woman that was cutting my hair? What advice would you give to them as they're trying to decide whether or not they're going to apply for a PPP loan?
Yeah, thank you, Miles. And again, thank you to the World Trade Center and Multicultural Commission for setting this up and getting the word out. I think it is important that multicultural small businesses are aware of the program and know that there is plenty of money still left. The last I heard, I think it was $129 billion still available. So there's plenty of money out there, but as Miles said, time is of the essence. June 30th is the deadline, and it still takes us a couple of days to process those loans, to get them submitted. So when we say June 30th, everybody's time frame really has got to be at least to get their applications into the lenders about the 27th or 28th if you can. But as Giles had mentioned before, the beginning process of the applications was very daunting. It was very difficult to understand, very difficult to understand what you need to get to the lenders. But I think we also have to realize that this is an unprecedented type of situation. And for SBA to be able to offer this type of program just, within a week, have the application and the portal ready to be submitted was a lot of work for them too. I'm glad I wasn't in their shoes, but yeah, there was a lot of technical issues. The very beginning, everybody was worried that the money was going to run out quickly. And so I think all of us lenders, we had a rush of applications that just was a wave that we didn't know how to handle that. I'm actually a one-man show, and so I was the only one processing the applications and getting the documentation from all the applicants. So it was quite daunting. I'd spoken to a couple of the financial institutions, and they were receiving thousands of applications, or hundreds of applications. The larger ones were receiving thousands of applications, and so it was tough for all of us. And I know there was some frustrations in the beginning, like Giles had mentioned, that I'm trying to figure out what to send and then try to find a lender that will take it and then hear back from them. But things have smoothed out a little bit better. We'll talk a little bit about Giles, maybe some experiences after he's applied for it and how it's changed since. But I just think it's important that for those who haven't applied for it and for people like your friend Miles, to not be afraid of the process. I think there's a lot of especially multicultural businesses out there that are a little afraid of doing this and how much work is it going to be and who do I talk to, how do I understand what's going on, but don't be afraid of the process, and the lenders should be able to help you with that process. And now that they're not inundated with the applications, they've got a little more time to sit and discuss what documents are going to be needed and help you through that process. So don't be afraid of it. Like Giles has said, there are multiple language. The applications are in multiple languages now. It's a lot better for multicultural businesses to go through. But I think word of mouth also is helpful in this process. So I think Miles talked about it in getting his haircut, but word of mouth is very important. And for those businesses who have friends that have businesses, make sure to let them know that, you know, there's still money available, and there's plenty of lenders out there that can help.
You know, there was one thing you just mentioned. In the beginning, it was very hard. Now it is so much easier. And one thing that I explained to a friend of mine that does hair as well, and is an Uber driver, that they didn't have the same level of documentation that other businesses had. So if you're a gig worker, it's actually rather easy, especially now that they've come up with applications just made for that. And I think that's a message that got lost in all the chaos that everybody was looking at, that this was a program that was actually made to get the money out there. And you made a point. I don't know if how many people realize that the banks and the institutions are in the beginning leveraging their own money. So this is a thing that banks don't normally do with this kind of speed. So hats off to them for being out there and helping out our industries. And I think that now, like you were doing, Miles, telling people that this was available, we need to really focus in and make sure people know that this is a much easier process than when I did it in April, as opposed to now, and especially if you're a gig worker. So if you are doing Uber or you're a 1099, this process is something that's manageable and easy to do. And the lenders are really willing to work with you. And that's another thing that most people probably aren't used to, especially in the minority community. They may have gone out for bank loans. I know we did, and didn't get one. And then we had to turn around, and now they're saying, go back to a bank. So there was I don't want to waste all my time. And so I think that's something we need to make very clear out there, that this is a different program, and we need to get out here and take advantage of this opportunity to keep our minority businesses afloat.
And I think a point was made where you also said, you know, it probably is better to deal with an institution that you have a relationship with already. I would echo that, but I would also, early on, I can't remember, it's probably, Miles, one of your webinars that I listened to, but it was suggested that, you know, it's okay to apply for this loan with a couple of other financial institutions. If you apply once and don't have luck with hearing back or anything, apply with another institution. What happens is, once the institution gets your application and they input it to the SBA portal, then it basically locks out the other institution. So it's kind of a first come, first serve. So if you can get your application in with a couple of them or 3 different institutions, and one of them can get that application in quicker for you, then the others, you don't really need to worry about them anymore, because they won't be able to input the application, and you can work with that other lender. So you know, I'm not sure if you're still advising that, but I had that happen to me as a lender. I had several applicants who had already applied with somewhere else, and then I'd gotten their application and started entering inputting the application into the portal, and it had told me that someone else had already inputted the application. So at that point, I can tell the borrower that, hey, look, you know, such and such bank has already got your information in. So, you know, make sure you know that they're the ones that you've got to follow through with and get whatever documentation they're asking for, so that they can proceed with the application.
Yeah,
that's a great point, Dean. And you know, early on, it was so busy and so frantic that a lot of what we were realizing is people were applying to banks, but the banks were so backed up. There were significant delays in getting to the point where the bank was actually entering the application into the portal, so the loan could be processed and they could end up getting their money. And so I actually hadn't heard that perspective before, that as they were going to other banks, if another bank was able to get to the point where they were about to enter into the portal, that's a great opportunity for the borrower to know, okay, it's already been in the portal at my first bank, I'm in the system, it's going to get processed. Yes. Whereas if they went to another bank and they didn't get that notification, then it's a good indicator that there was a jam up in the first bank, and so it's a good lender. So it's a good thing they went to another lender who was able to get it into the portal quicker. But Giles, to your point, I'm really glad that you made this point. Those days are over. where you're trying to juggle 2 or 3 different lenders. You're filling out these super complicated applications. Now it's a much more straightforward process. There's more flexibility for businesses. There is, last I saw, about $120 billion that is unused, which means that there's the things we process very quickly, much more in a much more straightforward manner. Dean, as we think about recording this and all of our various partners pushing this out to their communities to get the word out there, if you're talking to a small business owner, say it's an independent contractor, specifically, what are the specific steps they should do right now to go make sure that they can take advantage of the program before June 30th?
Well, again, time is of the essence. And so get with a lender and get the application into them. They generally, I think everybody, all of the lenders now have got a system down and know, either have a worksheet for you or can tell you right off the bat what documentation they're going to need. It's fairly simple. If you can get your taxes, if you're a 1099 individual, get something to verify your income for the last 12 months, or like I said, your taxes. Get that prepared, get that information with the application. If you get all of that organized and get that up front to the lender, it makes it a lot quicker. Now, lenders are submitting applications. There's no waiting period trying to get into the portal, and we're basically getting loan decisions, approvals, within the same day. I've had many where lately the new ones that I've gotten where I can get an answer within less than an hour. So it's pretty quick.
That's great. Thank you for that, Dean. And I would add that, again, in the beginning, we talked about that rapid response team. At any point in the process, you can go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business, go to the federal resource section. Since the rush for these has dropped off, we've scaled back the team, but we still do have a team in place, a smaller team that continue to help companies. And so find that link there to request assistance from the rapid response team, and you can have somebody who will jump in right away to help answer questions and help move things forward. Byron, we have a couple questions coming in the chat function. Before we go to those, Byron, I'd be curious to get your thought of for anybody watching, those are the people in the businesses that we don't have to be worried about, because we know they're gonna watch, they're gonna listen, they're gonna go ahead and take advantage of the program. What advice would you have for all of us on how we can get the word out to the people out there who aren't watching right now and wouldn't watch if some of us didn't take action to go get the word out and to help make sure that they're aware of the program?
Well, I can say, and some of my colleagues are with me, Nubia Pina and Zeman Zhao. And I think that one thing that we find most effective, and one bit of, feedback that we receive from our communities, is that those who are speaking of the opportunities are voices that have a disconnect, perhaps, maybe because there is an overall marketing aspect. And I think as Dean had mentioned, some people may not have a relationship with a particular lender, or they may not actually be in touch with maybe the Chamber of Commerce's output about this, or maybe even some people just feel that the offering is not available to them because it's for those folks. And I guess where I'm trying to narrow down and say is I think it's the messenger. And the messenger can actually provide a greater voice, and that voice will be heard by far 10 times more effectively. And that's not just to say that it's, the Chamber or the World Trade Center or a major lending institution. There are just some institutions that just have an amazing level of trust. The library, for example, is an incredible level of trust. The brand of a library, actually, people will listen to. And even some faith-based organizations. I know that maybe we don't, sort of talk about religion and politics, but we can talk about faith-based organizations that speak to their communities in ways and voices that are most credible. And I think that we should really invent and think about how we can be more innovative in that communication approach. and utilize some of these organizations. I mean, one example would, of course, be the task force, the subcommittee of the Multicultural Task Force that can disseminate that information with the many voices and cultural richness that we have in front of us. And I would just really just reiterate that it's really the voice that's speaking to you is how you hear it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Go ahead, Dean.
Well, can I also suggest that I know on your website there's a list of lenders there. I know the Utah Credit Union Association, they have a list of credit unions that are lenders. ABA, the Utah Bankers Association, they have a list of lenders there. So it's, you know, you can look at any of those sites and there's plenty of lenders that that they can choose from still taking applications.
You know, Miles, you asked a great question to Byron. How do you get the word out? Well, it's really your sphere of influence. You were able to talk. You actually gave a story earlier that really illustrates that. In our sphere of influence, the people who really will listen to you maybe won't even fact check you. So you go on your social media if you use it. You put it out there. You tell whoever you work with directly. You get your haircut. So I told my barber. You know, you tell the people you know, and you really spread it organically, and that's really more powerful than getting a message from an entity you work with maybe once a year. So my advice to everybody is put it out in the channels that you normally communicate in. If you're communicating at church, communicate with people at church. If you communicate via social media, I'm known for putting up Facebook pictures of animals doing crazy things. But underneath of that, say, talk to me about PPP. PPP is another one. But you know, you need to communicate in your sphere of influence, and we need to identify that all of us have a sphere of influence, and this is something that's very beneficial for every business that we can help succeed and stay afloat. We're winning as a community.
Yep, no, that's 100% true. You know, just as you were speaking, Giles, it reminded me of during the rapid response team, you know, during the mad rush in April, you know, they were processing 200 or 300 requests for assistance every single day. And through that, we got some really incredible stories. One came to mind about a small business owner that runs a few daycares. She was speaking to a rapid response team member, and they got on a phone call, and the business owner talked about how, you know, she was maxing out credit cards. She just was trying to figure out how are they going to make it as a business? How is she going to keep paying her employees? And you know, the stress that goes along with that is immense. And when she understood the PPP loans, that they could be forgiven, and she understood how beneficial this would be for her, not just her individually, but for the company that she was building and the people that were working for her, she broke down in tears because it was such a relief that the assistance was there. And I could tell many stories like that where people who are under immense pressure all of a sudden realize that there is this lifeline. It's a 2-month lifeline, and whether you're a business that's covering payroll and your other fixed costs, whether or not you're generating revenue, whether you're an independent contractor and you get, you know, 2.5 months worth of income to help bridge this gap, that is a major, major benefit. We all should be very motivated to get the word out. You know, Byron, you're 100% correct on the importance of the messenger. You, Nubia, and Z are doing phenomenal work, engaging with the community, getting the word out. And then, Giles, to your point, you know, we all need to roll up our sleeves and take individual accountability to do everything we can. You know, we're working with the Hope Corps, which is at the University of Utah. They have students who had internships who were canceled, doing a lot of great work for companies. We were able to get a list of 7,000 minority-owned businesses here in the state, and it's names and phone numbers. And so we now have 10 of these students who are cold calling, going through line by line a list of 7,000 names and phone numbers, calling them back up if they need to. And it's fascinating. You know, a lot of companies are aware of and they receive their PPP loan, but they're finding companies that had no idea, but now they're applying. And so at the end of the day, it's whatever we can do to get the word out. It's incumbent upon all of us to do so. So anyways, we digress a little bit. Getting back to the nuts and bolts of the program, Z, thank you. You've asked a couple of great questions. I'll go ahead and ask these we'll see, Dean, if maybe give you a first stab looking at a couple of these, and then we can fill in some of the gaps. So Z asked, if I have a very small business with one employee, is it still worth my time to apply? And the answer is absolutely yes. The more nuanced part of the question, do I have to prove that my employees have work authorization? Dean, what do you think?
Yeah,
I'm putting you in the hot seat.
Yeah, honestly, Miles, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
So that's okay. So so from my understanding, right, if an employee, right, for your business, you're paying your employees either with a 1099 if they're a contractor, or a W-2 if they are an employee. As long as you can show this an official employee with your either a 1099 as documentation or a W-2, that they're on your payroll. On the W-2 side, you're paying your payroll tax. That is what they're going to look at to determine what your average monthly payroll is. If it's an informal relationship and you don't have that documentation, then you're not going to be able to get the amount of the loan would be reduced by people that you're paying informally, if that makes sense. But, a really important but, if those individuals are receiving that money, they likely can apply as independent contractors, just like an Uber driver could, or somebody who's doing freelance work. Right, this is open for everybody. So freelance people, gig economy people, they all can apply. And so even though you may not be able to count somebody as an employee if you don't have a W-2 for them, they very well may be able to apply on their own. And if they can go back and show their average net monthly income, then that's the amount that they can get there. And so that's a way that even if you can't get money to pay them with, you can encourage them to apply on their own so that they can get their own money.
Yeah, and that is a good point, because I have had a couple of situations where an employer wanted to get some funds for a 1099 employee, but that company is not able to include them as an employee as those who are 1099s. Those 1099 employees have to apply on their own. Yep,
that's exactly right. Another question was I file a 1099, but I don't have a separate business bank account. Can I still qualify? My understanding, or we'll go, Dean, you shoot first.
Yeah, no, you could still, it doesn't matter whether you have a bank account or not. You can still apply for those, that PPP loan. And you can open an account, like I think most credit unions, and speaking for myself, we do require them to become a member of the credit union before I can process that loan, so that when we receive the funds, we give them the funds, then we deposit it to their account with us. So as far as credit unions, we operate a little differently, because you do need to be a member of a credit union before you can have any services of a credit union. So most likely credit unions will require you to open an account. But other institutions, I know there are some fintech companies that process the applications too, but you'll need somewhere to deposit the account, the funds. So you'll need to have somewhere that they can put that money to, but you don't have to have an account necessarily with that institution that you're applying for, other than maybe credit union.
Yep, that's a great explanation. Thank you, Dean. Giles, it looks like you may have had something to add.
Yeah, so we found out very easily that you could put the money where you wanted to put it. But I one caution for everyone, especially if you plan on doing forgiveness, you make sure that money is well documented how you spent it. And we should get into forgiveness on another presentation, because that's a whole nother evolving animal. But you don't need to apply for forgiveness for the first 10 months. And I would suggest waiting a little bit while they keep sorting it out. Let other people be the test case first. That's such a horrible thing to say, but it's true. Congress, Dean and I were just laughing that Congress worked with the Treasury Department, worked over the Treasury Department, talking about how the forgiveness works. But the thing you want to remember as a business owner is how that money comes in and how it's spent. needs to be very well documented. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So you need to be able to prove where the money went, how you utilized it, and then you need to have that ready. So I would advise putting it in an account where you can keep a tight rein on it, so you can use it for what it needs to be used for, so you can get the full forgiveness amount.
Yeah, Giles, that is a very, very good a good point, and one that we want to emphasize. You know, take the loan with the intent to get it forgiven. To get it forgiven, make sure you document everything. And there's tools out there that you can get. It'd be easy for us to push that out there. We have it on the coronavirus site, utah.gov/business website as well, where people come up with tools where you get the money and it helps you keep track of things in a way that is calibrated with the forgiveness application to try to make the forgiveness process as easy as possible. You know, here in the state, we've received, I believe, about $5.2 or $5.3 billion in PPP loans, which, and when Bloomberg came out and said we are the #1 state for utilizing the program, I think there was a sense of, great, we did some good work. And my immediate reaction was, no, we've started good work, but now the real measure of success is what % of these loans do we get forgiven? Because the true value in the program is getting the loans forgiven. And so now the work and the focus is on helping as great a percentage possible of that $5.3 billion, getting that forgiven, because that's going to help turbocharge the economy, help businesses out. What businesses don't need is more debt on their books, and that's why the forgiveness element of it is so important. And again, that rapid response team, I just want to make sure that I don't forget to mention that at least 15 times, because it can be such a great resource, not only on how you apply, but also as you go through this forgiveness process. We're going to make sure that the team is ready to go to help answer questions for companies, to help make that as easy of a process as possible.
I know this is not about the forgiveness, but I do want to mention that SBA came out yesterday with 2 new forgiveness applications. One is what they call an easy application, so it's not as daunting as the original application.
Yep, that's right, Dean. Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a few more questions. And while we're talking about documentation, what documents are these businesses going to need when they're applying for, one, the loan, and then also for forgiveness?
So if you want, Dean, I'll split that one with you.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll talk about the loan ones that I had to get together, and then I'll give you forgiveness because, well, I don't want to talk about it. You need your EIN, your incorporation documents. If you're a gig worker, obviously those things aren't, well, you'll have your EIN. You'll also need information on any individual who has ownership in your company above 20%. So kind of similar to the things you need when you open a bank account. You'll need information on your eligible payroll expenses. So I'm going to run through what those are really quickly. And this is if you are not 1099. If you're 1099, you just need that 1099 information. But if you have a company, you're going to need salaries, wages, tips, any compensation, any health insurance that's paid, retirement plans, anything that's paid for by the company, state tax and local taxes. And you also need your 2019 tax forms if you were in business in 2019. If you started after that, but before the date, I think it was in January, then you would just need to show that you had just started your business in January. And Dean, you can tell me if I was missing something, but, oh, and your driver's license.
Yeah, no, I think you've got that covered. There is something in there for mortgage interest also. If you had a loan before, you can also use that for mortgage interest. A key change in that was used to be you had to use the fund 75% of that for your payroll, but now it's 60%. So more flexibility with some of that. But yeah, I think you covered that. As far as the forgiveness, to be honest, the new application that's come out for the forgiveness, I haven't completely reviewed all of that, but it's a lot easier than what it was. I know I saw a webinar. I think Hannah had mentioned that there's a spreadsheet that they have that you can enter all the applicable numbers in there, and it's like it's again daunting to say the least. But the new application, it basically documentation is important. The process of that is basically the borrower will submit the application and the documentation to the lender, and the lender will send that into the SBA for forgiveness. Early on, if I recall correctly, it was thought that the borrowers were going to have to submit forgiveness to SBA, but it's all through the lender. So don't be intimidated that you've got to talk to SBA and get the documentation to them. You'll work through the lender that you got the loan through. They'll ask you for whatever documentation, additional documentation that they'll need, and they'll gather that information and send that to SBA for the forgiveness process.
Great. Another just quick question. Are they still required to spend the money in 8 weeks?
Oh, just became 24.
Perfect.
So,
that's what we like to hear.
A lot of changes. I'm sorry, Dean. I was just reading that myself and was quite amazed. Yeah, 24 months.
24 weeks.
24 weeks, sorry.
From 8 weeks to 24 weeks. Again, a lot more flexibility to use longer term to use that money for. I lost my train of thought, but yeah, they made it a lot easier that way.
That's great.
Yeah, they did. So it's 24 weeks from the date that you take the loan, and a few other changes I think are worth highlighting really quickly. Originally in the program, 75% of the loan had to go towards payroll. They've reduced that down to 60% of the loan amount needs to be used for payroll to get forgiveness. But this is one important point. Say somebody comes in and they end up spending 59% of the loan on payroll, they are not eligible for any forgiveness. And so there's a hard cliff at 60%, whereas originally it was 75%, but if you came in below that, then you would receive a reduced amount of forgiveness, but you were still eligible for forgiveness. A couple other things, the maturity of the loan on or after June 5th is from 2 years to 5 years. And so originally, whatever wasn't forgiven, it's still a loan, super low interest rates. I think it settled on about 1%, but the maturity was 2 years. Now the maturity of the loan for anything that's not forgiven would be 5 years. And they did make it so it's a little more flexibility on the forgiveness process.
There's one thing we didn't mention. It's the EIDL. If you happen to apply for the EIDL as well, and you got the grant, that has to be subtracted from your forgiveness for the loan. So just something that a lot of people didn't get in, but the EIDL program just started back up yesterday. So if you apply and you get the grant, that's going to be subtracted from your loan forgiveness. And Dean, you can probably do all the accounting gymnastics on that. I just know enough to say that I know there's going to be something I have to pay back, but I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, the EIDL was another disaster loan program the SBA has. I don't know a whole lot about that program because as a lender, we weren't the ones that were applying for that for borrowers. The small businesses had to go through SBA to apply for that. So I don't know if Miles has more information on that program.
Yeah, so the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, these are low interest loans. They're not forgivable. And so whatever you take out, you're going to need to pay back. But the again, very low rates, low personal guarantee requirements, deferment of payment and interest for several months. The program was overutilized, oversubscribed, and so it crashed the system. They got it back on. It crashed the system again. A lot of people taking advantage of it because even if it's not forgivable, it's still a great way to get cash into your company. For a while, they limited the program to only agricultural businesses. But like Giles mentioned just yesterday, they've opened it back up to everybody. And so it is a great option. Again, on the website, coronavirus.utah.gov/business, we've got some really good information there as well as links where you can go ahead and apply. The key difference, and one thing I will highlight, like Dean mentioned, the EIDL loans, you apply directly through the SBA, through a web portal. whereas PPP, you're applying for those through a lender here locally and also getting your forgiveness through that lender.
Great. And I have just one last question for you guys. So let's suppose that someone who needs to apply for these loans doesn't have a good relationship with their lender or any relationship with a bank. How can they go about that? Like, is there someone who can walk them through step by step?
Well, again, there's the listing of those who will take the applications on the different sites that I talked about. Each one of them have dedicated individuals or even departments that that process the loan applications. And I know now, because they don't have the volumes that they have much more time to spend with individuals and go through the process and let them know, what it is and what documentations they'll need. So don't be afraid to call one of those institutions and ask about it, and somebody will be able to communicate that with them.
Yep. So Hannah, any more questions from the YouTube channel?
No.
Okay, that's good. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today, for going over this. Anything that we haven't covered, Dean and Giles or Byron, that you feel like we should before we wrap up today?
No, and I think that, when we were discussing with Hannah and planning this, we knew that the forgiveness portion might be a little complicated, and I think that's going to be ongoing. So there might be a special segment dedicated to that, I think, as a follow-up. I think that Giles and Dean might agree, but I would also just love to use this chance and opportunity again to thank you and to hope that the World Trade Center may be able to find these relationships that we're making and building as an ongoing legacy for future economic advancement and economic growth in our state. And just seeing Giles and Dean, you've got the future of our economy in front of you. So, I mean, what more could you ask? Well, with that, I'll let Giles and Dean say some parting words. Giles.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for letting me share my experience. Byron, it's great to work with you and Dean and the rest of the team. Miles, I thank you for all you've done to broadcast and amplify our voices, as well as reaching out to the minority business owners who really need to jump on this program to make sure they're viable. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I echo Giles' appreciation to everybody. But my message that I want to make sure is that, we've talked about this before, your sphere of influence, word of mouth. It's really important. There's still a lot of money out there, and there's a lot of companies that still need it. I even talked to one yesterday that said, oh, yeah, it would be nice to have that money, but I want other companies to benefit. And so I'll let them apply for it. But, it's time. The time is limited. So please, your word of mouth and even your businesses that come and apply for those funds, because that's what it's for. We want to boost the economy, and this is a wonderful program. And so come and apply.
That's great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Byron, Giles, Dean, it's been a pleasure. I look forward when we can all get together and grab lunch or coffee or whatever it may be together and catch up in real time. But this is such an important topic. We're grateful for your leadership on getting this message out to the community. And we're thankful for Z and Nubia for helping to pull this recording together. And now the real work will be to get this message out as far as wide as possible between now and June 30th. And that's a responsibility that rests with all of us. So thank you again for joining. Hannah, thank you so much for running all the logistics on this, and I hope that everybody has a great day.